Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining here with us this morning. I'm glad everyone was able to hop on, and we're excited to have Eric Weissmann from NEXT here. A few announcements before we get started. This presentation is being recorded, and we will email out the recording later on this afternoon. If you have any questions, please throw them into the Q&A or chat. We'll be monitoring those throughout the discussion here. We'll go on and get right into it. So Eric Weissmann, Executive Director of NEXT here in Greenville. NEXT is the, I don't know if premier is the right word, but the premier organization here in Greenville to support economic development through entrepreneurship and innovation. Eric joined back in the fall from Cintrifuse, a similar ecosystem support organization in Cincinnati. He spent some time ecosystem building and brings a lot of experience there in supporting startups. And we're excited to have him on to share, I think best practices, what he's learned so far in Greenville, and how he sees the Greenville ecosystem growing in the future. And I think Eric, maybe to get started, maybe walk us through, how did you end up in the in this ecosystem building space? What drew you to it?
Yeah,
what was that career track that led you into it?
Great. Well, thanks again to Daniel and to SCRA for inviting me to talk. It's a pleasure to get to speak to all of you. I'm sorry that I don't have a replica of the Star Spangled Banner behind me. I think that's what Francis Scott Key wrote about, is behind Daniel. That must be an original there. It looks like it's tattered and worn, but no, I appreciate the time and look forward to talking about what is one of my favorite subjects, is how to help entrepreneurs in this thing called ecosystem building, entrepreneurial ecosystem building. So yeah, I've been in Greenville for about 7 months. Started in September of last year. The second my wife and I became empty nesters, I got a new job. So dropped our youngest off to school, and then the next finished at Cintrifuse on Friday and started at NEXT on that next Monday. So it's been a whirlwind. It's been a lot of fun. But yeah, the organization that I came from in Cincinnati called Cintrifuse, I was part of the founding team back about 9 years ago, when the big businesses that call Cincinnati home, Procter & Gamble, Kroger, Fifth Third Bank, et cetera, they got together and wanted to find a way for the region to grow and remain relevant without depending on them. Once you get to be a certain size of business, of big co, a large global corporation, you get rid of as many people a year as you hire, right? You're just kind of treading water. That's doom for a company, or for a city that's got 8 Fortune 500 companies. How are we going to grow and attract fresh talent? And we're going to do that. So the strategy was, let's do that by not shrinking. Let's hold on to the talent. Let's focus on some of these small, high growth businesses. So plenty of parallels and plenty of similarities between the mission of both organizations, both NEXT and Cintrifuse, and at the end of the day, we are economic development drivers, economic development engines. Here at NEXT, we want people to move to or stay in the Greenville region, and we're going to do that by fostering entrepreneurship and innovation. So those are some of the things that attracted me to this opportunity, in that the impact we have is going to be great. But at the end of the equation, it all has to do with jobs. Like at some point, it has to turn into jobs. But how you get there and how long it takes to get there, those paths and roads are long, and there's a lot of offshoots to them. But over time, we're going to be able to look back 10 to 20 years from now and say, did any of this work? How do we know this is working? We're going to know it's working as Greenville starts to rise up the ranks in some of these lists that are populated of PitchBook and Crunchbase and venture-backed startups. We're going to know it's working when our talent pipeline is full and we're attracting the type of new business leaders, future of work type of opportunities that are popping up here, and we're already seeing it.
Gotcha. Yeah. And so 7 months into the job here, what has there been any surprises about Greenville? Anything you learned you were surprised to hear about coming into the ecosystem?
I would say, 7 months into it, I've got it all figured out. I have got all the answers now. It is clear cut. No, there's really been no surprises, and I think some of that is because I'm aware of the work that needs to be done, and grateful for the foundation of Next, of SCRA. There's a lot of support already in the ecosystem that just needs some coalescing, just needs some coaching to see how those gears can mesh, and we can collaborate with each other. Mapping out the journey of an entrepreneur. Where do you start? Where do you end? Where do you get hung up? But being able to come in with that view of, here's where people in our ecosystem get stuck. Yeah. Here's where people in our ecosystem thrive. Here's people in our ecosystem that leave. And why did we lose them? Why did they go somewhere else? What was happening? What limbs on the tree do we prune? Where do we water? Where do we fertilize that soil? So no, I think that I'm encouraged by a lot of the traction and the positive energy that I already see. And hopefully we'll get to hit on some of that stuff that we've got coming up in short order. Yeah. Next week is going to be pretty exciting here, but anyway, yeah, I'm not challenged. I'm challenged, or just say I'm not intimidated by any of the challenges that are in front of us. Just the opposite. I'm cracking my knuckles, rolling up my sleeves, and saying, let's get at it.
Yeah, and I can attest to that. I know Eric's been meeting with a ton of entrepreneurs across the ecosystem, meeting with a ton of stakeholders. I know Eric's, hopefully this isn't giving away any secrets, but you mentioned mapping out an entrepreneur's journey. Mm-hmm. I know you've been doing a lot of work around there. So when you've done this mapping, where are the gaps? Where have you noticed? I know we can spend all day talking about the strong points, but where are those gaps?
Yeah. Right now, the biggest gap is in growth capital. And this isn't a unique Greenville thing. This is something that I think a lot of ecosystems face. And if we could boil down the three things that, let's pretend that like there's only three things that entrepreneurs need. We'll just say talent, customers, and money. I like to just play this game when I'm giving presentations. It'll be a little tough in the virtual, but I usually ask, like, what do you think? What do people think is the most important thing that an entrepreneur needs? And we just play this game, and some folks think that money is the most important thing, and some folks think that because with money you can that allows you to build a product or hire a team, and talent is the second thing. Well, why wasn't talent first? But to me, the most important thing is customers. That if you don't have a customer, you don't really have a business. You just have an idea. It's just exists on a whiteboard or a notebook. So we can't lose sight of that. We can't lose sight of the importance of customers. However, capital is important too. Access to capital, visibility into how am I going to fund this thing, and how am I going to get from square zero to square one, and the rest of that journey. So in just the initial assessment that we've done, which is mapping out all 54 different nodes in the ecosystem of whether it's networking groups or prototype development. We've got some pre-accelerators here. We've got a dearth of co-working spaces. We've got organizations like SCRA and SC Launch that are here to help. But when we look at that growth capital stage, there's a gap there. And some of this, hopefully, is just a matter of awareness. that it's just not evident that there's folks that are here that want to and can lean in. Venture South has done an amazing job on establishing an angel network and building out some of that the momentum that we're all benefiting from now. But once you get to that stage where, okay, now I'm ready for Series B or Series C capital, where's that going to come from? And like I said, this isn't a glaring, we're the only people in the world that are having this problem. This is a common problem. And I'm also saying that it's not that everybody needs to drop what they're doing and focus on this. It's just an observation and, something that we either need to, address full on or just acknowledge and say, great, not going to win that one today. We'll move on to some other battles.
Gotcha. And as you think about the ecosystem 10, 20 years from now, what are things the ecosystem can do to in 20 years from now where growth capital is not so much as a constraint for our early stage entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I think part of it is also an education component. And we got this event coming up next week called NEXT LaunchPad. It's a brand new event, is focused on early stage entrepreneurs. We rounded up 6 different service providers who are donating over $100,000 in prizes. We're giving away $100,000 next week. SCRA is one of them that has a $25,000 grant as kind of the grand prize. But when we looked at the 82 people applied, 82 different early stage founders applied to LaunchPad. And the number one thing that everybody wanted, because they could rank their order if it was design and branding by Brains on Fire or legal services from White or business services from Elliott Davis. The number one thing most everybody wanted was money. And I think you look at those, and let's say that I think it was about 60 people said money was the first thing that they wanted. If you multiply 60 times 25,000, that's $1.5 million that's needed to satisfy this, what the ecosystem is saying they need. Now, I understand not everybody deserves, and it's asking for it and needing it are two different things. It's like if I ask my kids what they want for dinner, they'd say Skittles, but not everybody needs to get that. But where we need to kind of coach the ecosystem is, why do you think you need money? And what is it, and how much, and let's go through this. What some of the folks that have and do fund ventures, what are they looking for, and why do you think they're asking about total available market, and why do you think traction is important? And have you looked at some of these other outlets and resources to alternative sources of funding outside of just strict venture capital? So I think that's an exercise that is important for us to do. To educate both sides of the ecosystem, make an awareness that there's a lot of folks here that are doing things that could use some help, and the folks that are doing things, make them aware that there's not just one door to go through, right? I say this a lot, there's no wrong front doors to the ecosystem. However you got into this mix is great. Now we need to be connected on that back end to make sure that we kind of ping pong you into the right resource. But it's not going to be a panacea that somebody just, you go through one door and all my problems are solved. It is an ecosystem. And, when you look at natural ecosystems like a rainforest, that's not all just tall trees. There's ferns and rocks and creeks, and it's an ecosystem that lives off of each other. And we've got to foster that here.
And I just dropped a link in chat, everyone, for the LaunchPad event. I'll go on and put a plug in for it. It's 2 to 5 or 5:30 next Thursday, the 7th, at the Greenville One Center. So feel free to come out, meet some great entrepreneurs, support the community, and see who some of these great entrepreneurs winning these prizes are. We're excited to support. And Eric, I know we spent some time talking about Greenville, but let's zoom out maybe on just ecosystem building as as a practice. How do you view that practice, that process of ecosystem building? What's that framework?
So that's been a lot of fun for me to be involved in. When I started at Cintrifuse, I wasn't a startup guy. I wasn't even an economic development guy. I'm a marketing guy. Spent a good deal of time with Fifth Third Bank in Cincinnati. Headed up, we worked in marketing, worked in retail marketing for the Cincinnati affiliate. Worked in at the Walt Disney Company prior to that, the Disney Cruise Line marketing. So when I caught wind of this opportunity at Cintrifuse, at first I was resistant because I'm like, look, I'm not a startup guy. I'm much more conservative than that. But what was evident was there's a need to bring entrepreneurs together and to focus on what entrepreneurs need. So there's a movement or conventional wisdom that only entrepreneurs can lead entrepreneurial ecosystems. And that's only partially true. They need to be at the center. They need to be, at the core of strategies, and that's going to be how we measure success. Like if we had a Fitbit for the ecosystem, we're going to be watching what these group of do. But entrepreneurs want to entrepreneur, right? They want to do their thing. They don't want to run a community or run an ecosystem. So when I look at founders, I think of them as like the front of the train, the locomotive. They're the engine. But there's a lot of other cars in that train that comprise that whole thing. And yes, we need those with drive and energy and direction to bust through hurdles and get things out of the way. But we also need the people that are the talent that's going to be comprised on that train. But there's a third persona that I look at as the snowplow, right? The person at the front of the train that's clearing things off of the tracks. It makes the conditions right for entrepreneurial success. And that's what an ecosystem builder does in my mind. So, when you look at, it's kind of like, having a golfer run a golf course. They know how to golf. They know good shot selections and what good course management would look like, or what the course should look like, but they don't understand course management of how to when to fertilize the grass, when to cut the grass, even how to hire the staff. So those golf course management is different than being a good golfer, but we have to pay attention to both. It was John Moore who blessed me with that metaphor, and I'm just running with it because it makes a lot of sense. So anyway, when I got into this thing, there was an underswell of entrepreneurs need to lead startup communities. Brad Feld wrote that book, and now Ian Hathaway and him have done round 2 of that. I stay in touch with both of them, and it's fun to compare notes, because they're learning now that yes, entrepreneur, there is this thing of entrepreneur support organizations that are vital to helping an ecosystem grow. But you got to listen to the entrepreneurs. At the same stretch, you don't want to pin them down and say, okay, in addition to running your successful IoT business, you also need to run the startup meetup, every week, and you also need to run this. So there's a need for that, and I got involved with the Steve Case, billionaire, now investor, founder of America Online, chairman of Time Warner. But he started this thing, Rise of the Rest, and the thesis was that 75% of all venture capital in the United States, 75% of that is concentrated in just 3 states: California, New York, and Massachusetts. Gets 75% of all venture capital. So that leaves the rest of the country fighting for 25%. That's not a sustainable equation. That's not very fair. And how do we fix that? So they did a a barnstorming, still do a barnstorming tour. They wrap a big bus and get a bunch of investors and other tech people, and they do a tour of towns, cities in the middle of the country. And Cincinnati was on we were on tour number 1. We were stop number 3 of tour number 1. So that got me exposed to other people in other cities that are doing what we were doing in Cincinnati. Through that, became connected with the Kauffman Foundation, an organization in Kansas City that is dedicated to helping entrepreneurs and support organizations. And I was at a conference. It's called an eShip conference, and this was a few years back now. But a guy, Andy Stoll, who runs that eShip program, was realizing that, here's the Kauffman Foundation, Scrooge McDuck money, billions of dollars in their endowment, and we still have a challenge of how we can support entrepreneurs. And they were, it's not for lack of giving the money out. It's $50,000 here, $100,000 here, but it really wasn't moving it as a sea change as they needed. So Andy was there on stage, and he was kind of challenging. There were about 300 or 400 of us that from all over the country, ecosystem builders, and he said, what if we agreed that entrepreneurs need communities? Communities are really ecosystems. Ecosystems, because they're complicated, ecosystems need builders. So what if entrepreneurial ecosystem building was a thing? What if it was a practice? What if it was something that you could be good at? What if it was something you could study? What if it was a major? Sports management is a major. Yeah. Urban planning is civil engineering with a couple things attached to it. So why not entrepreneurial ecosystem building? So I was pretty fired up when he said that, sitting in the audience, and so I called up my friends at Miami University, like on the next break, and said, because one of the things that I was responsible for at Cintrifuse was university relations. So University of Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky University, Xavier, and Miami University were all kind of in my body of work. So I called up my friend Mark Lacker at Miami and said, I want to teach a class on entrepreneurial ecosystem building. And they bit. It took a few years, but we got it into the curriculum. And now I think this past semester is the 7th semester that we've done. I'm now remote, obviously, teaching that. But the thing that Miami sparked them to is these are jobs. This is a career path. What Daniel, what you and I do is ecosystem. Like it's all part of it. Imagine a venture analyst, or imagine somebody that's at an entry-level position at a firm in, say M25 Ventures in Chicago, and they're hiring for an entry-level person, and they say, well, let me, I need to explain to you what an accelerator is and how we partner with Techstars, and have this kid come in and say, well, actually, I majored in finance. I got a minor in entrepreneurship, and I got a certification in ecosystem building. I'm good. I know how this all fits in. Imagine that. And why not, right? This is the new phase of economic development. Target isn't going to move from Minneapolis and come to Greenville. Right. Those days are over. And now with remote working, and how that has taken a new complexion on incentives, and how governments, really focus on motivating people to bring their businesses to town. Well, what if the CEO lives here, but all 100 of employees live elsewhere? That it's just framing that up differently. But entrepreneurs are going to be persistent. They're going to be here and ever present. So that's the new competition, is to get those entrepreneurs to move and find that way of life in your town, versus trying to get they'll still exist. The traditional economic development will still exist, but there's another lane, and that lane is running in parallel and needs to have as much attention paid to it as traditional economic development. That's my theory.
And we saw that, for the audience that doesn't know, I spent the past 5 or 6 years or so in Central Illinois, and we saw that some of those towns, Bloomington, where State Farm is headquartered, Peoria, where Caterpillar is headquartered, you saw some of them, they rise and fall on that one headquarters. It does seem like entrepreneurial ecosystem building kind of diversifies that risk around, and just seems to be a growing and newer and better way of thinking about economic development.
You need to have somebody that speaks startup, right? You need to have an organization or some way. And it's exciting for me to be able to bridge those gaps between the traditional economic development, traditional high growth startups with some of these nimble, agile, often crazy entrepreneurs that are just doing cool things, and you don't even, they haven't been invited to the table before. And that's what's fun, to uncover a lot of that and to say you're all part of the ecosystem. When we noticed, so in the Cincinnati days, when trying to identify all the different nodes, all the things that were happening in the ecosystem, it was like somebody, everybody's playing their own notes, but it wasn't making a song. We needed a conductor, the orchestra, some rallying cry to pull everybody in. So we created a brand around what we called Startup Cincy. And, when we would ask the various components, the stalwarts of the ecosystem, how many startups do you think are in the ecosystem? How many, do you think are here? And we'd ask a fund, somebody who is invested in startups, and they'd say, well, the best startups, we invest in only the best startups, and we've got about 40 in our portfolio and maybe 10 in our pipeline. So we're going to say 50. Okay, 50. Got it. Ask another, an accelerator or university program, hey, how many do you think? And they'll be like, well, we put through 10 a year, about half of them stick around in town. Another year, goes by, maybe, 3 of them are still in business. So, somewhere between 6 and 3. And I'm like, okay, 56 is what we're talking about. I think there's more than what you guys are seeing. So we created this brand. I won't go into the whole story about it, but made t-shirts, passed out these t-shirts, and they had this Startup Cincy on it, and you were all a part of this ecosystem, no matter if you had a tech enabled startup or a lifestyle business. Everybody that was a part of the community had a healthy disrespect for the status quo. Right? There was that entrepreneurial spirit about it, and the result was like building a lighthouse on the shore, and you wake up the next day and there's 100 ships in the harbor. Like, where did they come from? And the truth was, they were always there. And we'd ask them, like, well, wait a minute, you're in this vertical that this fund that we talked to is interested in. Why didn't they say anything about it? You're like, oh, I didn't want their money. I didn't want to give up equity. That's fine. They can do this thing. I'm doing this. Gotcha. So when you go to look at those traditional routes, that's all you're seeing, right? Like the parable of 8 blind men that go up to an elephant, and they each see a different part of it. And that's all your view of the ecosystem. But who's looking at the ecosystem and understanding that, are you all connected? And again, getting back to what I said earlier, like, why isn't this connection happening? Is there a reason for it? Do we just need to divide that? Or what if we join these together? What if we got everybody in the same room once a month, novel, and just said, what'd you do last month? You got 3 minutes, and go around that. So that's a spoiler alert for, what's coming down the pike, but it's, and I'm making it sound really simple. It's not. It's art and science. There's a little bit of both, but I get fired up about it. So I'm sorry for rambling on that.
No, that's awesome. And the case study, if you want to call it, from Startup Cincy is really interesting. And when you look at maybe Cincinnati or other cities or regions across the US or globally, like, who's doing this really well? Who do I like? Who do you like? Who's doing it well? Who do you look to learn lessons from?
Top of the list is Minneapolis. The Forge North group there, which is in greater MSP, that's their chamber and economic development under one roof. Forge North is their initiative for startups. Matt Lewis and team out there. I've always looked up to them. And you're reminding me now that I haven't reached out to them in probably 7 months that I've been here, and I need to do that. So I really like Minneapolis. I like what they're doing. You know, we're gonna, obviously Cincinnati, you know, is on my Hall of Fame, but Columbus, right up the road from Cincinnati, has got a lot going for it. Do a lot of three things really. It's the state capital. They've got a Drive Capital, which is a major venture fund that is bringing a lot of attention to the Midwest. And then we can't forget Ohio State, and you know that's a city unto itself that brings 60,000 new people in regularly, not just for football games. I mean, from student enrollment, it's a lot more for football games. But I like Columbus. I like Minneapolis. Indianapolis is got a lot going for it too. It's a little interesting dynamic there, and I know that you're familiar with that ecosystem as well. But Indiana, it's Indianapolis. It's one, and there's things going on in Fort Wayne and Bloomington. I've got a lot of respect for some of that, but Indianapolis kind of gets the share of that noise. Let's see, there's some other stuff that's Buffalo is impressive. They've got to shout a little bit louder about some of the things that are attractive there, and the 43 North initiative. Tulsa is another one. Tulsa's put a concerted effort behind diversity and being intentional about that. So they've got they've got a lot of positive momentum, and a lot of people that are behind in buttressing the initiative. And that's another challenge, is that it's got to be organic. You can't fake a lot of this stuff, but every now and then you need a shot of adrenaline in the heart, like Pulp Fiction. You need to wake everybody up, and that takes some outside influence. But it's a weird thing that you can't force it. You can't, but you also have to be. And that's why I use the word catalyst a lot. We got to be involved in the chemical, reaction here, but we're going to kind of back out of the way. We help these get together, and then we back out of the way. So those are some of the top of mind ecosystems.
Gotcha. And you mentioned Tulsa's work in diversity. Can you speak to the importance of diversity in that entrepreneurial ecosystem, and maybe following up to that, what do we do in Greenville in the Upstate to push the ball forward on that front?
So it's critical, diversity, but diversity, equity, and inclusion needs to have another I next to it, and that is intentionality. We need to be intentional about this. It can't just be something that we just placate. There's got to be some intentionality to it. One of the things that I look at diversity, yes, age, gender, sex, race, all of that. Those are like the traditional types of diversity, but it is also diversity of business model, and sometimes that's more inclusive of some of those other diverse led startups aren't tech enabled. So let's pay attention to those, but also, how do we bring these two groups together and apply technology to startups that may not think of themselves as technology or tech enabled? But what if you could introduce a group of startups to what I call entry level automation? MailChimp, marketing automation list, HubSpot, even QuickBooks, to be able to learn how to leverage that type of technology so that you can focus on other areas of your business and scale better, faster, et cetera. So one of the projects that I've done in my past was to we rounded up a group of tech companies, Google, who was the other one? Oh, JP Morgan Chase kind of underwrote the whole thing, but we had a 2-day workshop. It's called Nitro Boot Camp. And we got diverse founders to come to this boot camp and just inundated them with this type of technology, so that it was a bridge for them to go from, here in the upstate, it would be for them to go from Village Launch to SC Launch. How do I bridge that gap? I don't even know anything about technology. How can I, start to just dip my toe in the water of that? So those are some things that are in the back of my head, but in the front of my head is about, who we're asking, how's it going? Like, who are we talking to? And so with LaunchPad, we were intentionally diverse and sought out the advice and help from 10 different entrepreneur support organizations here in the upstate. So of those 82 applications and the 6 service providers, we wanted to filter that in some way, shape, or form, so that those service providers didn't have to go through this list of 82. Let's ask Jeanette and Rhonda from Village Launch. Let's ask Nika White from the Chambers of Minority Business Accelerator. Let's ask Reno Deaton from the platform at Greer. Let's ask Merle. Let's ask you, Danny. Like, who's doing good stuff and who could use some coaching, and that's the start of again being intentional to say we want this whole thing to grow, and tech and tech enabled is just one sliver of it. But the more that we can be obvious about who we're trying to help, I think that hopefully some of that diversity will be not a byproduct of it, but it will come out as a result of it, and that will draw attention to those both ends of the spectrum, to say, I didn't realize that there were these types of entrepreneurs out there. I didn't realize there was a support was meant for me too, and really bridge that gap with I keep saying it, but it's intentionality.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And maybe as thinking about Greenville, upstate, you mentioned Next LaunchPad. That's a completely new initiative, new event this year. Mm-hmm. Anything else in the pipeline, looking the next year or two? I know you're still doing a lot of information gathering and mapping. Mm-hmm. I mean, the LaunchPad has been really cool to watch it unfold, because as Eric said, like it's sort of beaten some companies out of the woodwork that we just wouldn't have known about, wouldn't have come across our desk without this. So I'm curious if you've got anything new planned as well the next year or so.
Yeah, one of the things that we need to do. So one of the things that the genesis of LaunchPad was to be at the other end of the seesaw to Next Venture Pitch. Next Venture Pitch is a tentpole event, signature event for Next. It's always in the fall, always focuses on later stage companies that have raised or are raising money. So we wanted to have something that was in the spring, that was focusing on early stage entrepreneurs, that widened the funnel a little bit. But right in the middle of that fulcrum, I want to have something around business development for startups that could use that big customer. And what if that big customer was a large corporation that happened to be headquartered here in the upstate? And just introducing them to startups as a vendor, not to acqui-hire or to acquire them or to buy their IP and drive them out of business, nothing like that, but just to introduce new business models or new approaches to supply chain efficiency or any of that. So I would look for that. And I've had some preliminary conversations of how we can pull that off. So in LaunchPad, what we want is for people to get introduced to service providers that can help strengthen their business. In Venture Pitch, we want to have folks that are getting introduced to and figuring out how to raise more capital. But in the middle, we want business development. We want contracts. We want paid contracts, pilots between large corporations and startups that can manifest themselves into strengthening that business, not just getting you off the ground, but getting you solid. Maybe your first big customer, And let's just say that in my experience, I've done that successfully, and it's been a blast. And I'm pretty confident that we can pull that off here.
No, that's awesome. And that's a, the past life. I was a VC, and that seems to be such a great progression. Find service providers to help me start my business, get off the ground, find customers, and start building traction. And once I've got that, go out and get capital.
Yep.
One question here from the audience. In your experience, what particular skills or qualities set successful businesses or entrepreneurs apart?
It's there's one thing that you hear, which is kind of a conundrum, where the tenacity of the startup founder and don't take no for an answer, and you've got to have, some of that. You also need a dose of realism with that, and you do need to be able to say, this isn't working, and I just have to be real with myself. So that level of self-assessment, matched up with perseverance and grit, but self-realization, being that type of self-awareness about what you're seeing and hearing, it's tough, and it's tough for support organizations like Next, because we want to be. It's critical that we do listen to startup founders, but not everybody's idea is going to be, is going to take off. And sometimes it's like, when you watch American Idol, and we see the person that's singing, and they're just not good, and the judges tell them they're not good, but then immediately they leave crying from the room, and they're comforted by their support group, who's just refusing to believe what Simon Cowell just said. But the truth, that, so you have to be aware of some of those obvious signs and understand, it's time to pivot. It's time for me to move on. It's just not working. And sometimes that runs counter to the myth of entrepreneurship, that never give up, never fall for what they're telling you. There's always a way. So it's an interesting contradiction there. But zombie startups are one of the challenges of support organizations, for sure. And that's one of the good things about the coastal environments, is the ruthless nature of chew them up and spit them out. You only got 2 months, bang, we just got to churn through this. And that's one of the downfalls or challenges of those that aren't on those coastal ecosystems, is sometimes the runway is long enough that it's really great, but it also perpetuates some of these not great ideas, and you really should have cut bait a while ago. So perseverance, but it's also matched with some ability to have that empathetic listening, is a skill that when you see that in an entrepreneur who says, nope, had to change, failure, embracing failure is also something that's important for entrepreneurs. That's something that in a big code town like Chicago or Cincinnati or Cleveland, you don't want to be on your third company, but in a place like Boulder or Silicon Valley, San Francisco, where you say, I'm on my 7th startup, everybody sits close. Really cool. Like, what do you got? What did you do the first 6 times? So I would say there's 2 big traits: perseverance, with some empathy there, but then also being not afraid to fail.
Gotcha. And I would add to that, just from my background, like relentless, and this I think goes to perseverance, but like relentless focus on your customer and their problem, I think would go along with that. And anyone in the audience with any questions, feel free to drop them in chat. I'm going to ask Eric the last question I've got lined up here for him. So go on and get your questions in. But Eric, when you think about what success looks like the next 10 or 20 years, what is that pathway of an entrepreneur look like here in Greenville in the Upstate, if we've done our jobs well over the next decade or so?
I think one of the things that I want to accomplish is an obvious exposure to the infrastructure. When we think about infrastructure, people think of roads and connections, and that's fine. So let's continue that metaphor for a second. If I tell you, Daniel, that you've got to get to Kansas City tomorrow, you're already in your head thinking how you're going to get there. I'm going to get in my car. I'm going to back out on my driveway. Small roads lead to big roads, lead to an airport. I get on a plane. I have a ticket. I go to another airport, and the process repeats itself. That's how I get there. But if I ask you, not you, but if I ask you, like, how do you start a business? Do I get in my car? I got to fly at some point, and I need money. So, so being obvious of saying, here's the infrastructure, like literally visualizing it and say, these are early resources. And then you might get on a car, you could take a subway, but these are some other things. And then you might go back, and being able to plot that out. And I think you've seen me, give that exercise before, but that's how we're going to know that success is working here, is when folks say, I know I've seen these paths. I've seen folks go down this infrastructure now, and it's obvious. It's not hidden. It's not cloistered. It's not you need some secret password or some code word and doors open for me. Being evident of that infrastructure and having multiple people be able to say, and with confidence, well, here's how I navigated through. Interesting. Here's how I navigated through. So that acknowledgement of that multiple paths and visible infrastructure, entrepreneur support infrastructure will be critical. So those are some of the qualified or qualitative ways. The more quantitative ways, we're going to raise on PitchBook rankings. You're going to see the state of South Carolina and obviously hopefully the upstate of being more in the forefront when it comes to venture dollars. Again, that's not the end. That's not the only goal, but it sure helps when we're comparing ourselves to other peer cities. We got to look like a duck, quack like a duck. We better invest like, we got to look like some of these things that we want to be like. I'd love to have Greenville be on some of the lists. I'm grateful for Southern Living and Condé Nast and all that sort of stuff, but I'd like to be more than just a destination for that type of lifestyle, but focus on an entrepreneurial lifestyle and focus on I can have really great stuff. I'm having a great time and I'm running a great business, and we're hiring people and don't think that that's not happening here. I think it's happening. It's just a matter of lifting the rock up and saying, did you see this? And did you know how they got started? Now this, and then, the two things, the great resignation and the great migration are going to help our region of the country, because now people have the opportunity and the pathway to start their own business. I've been a bartender forever. I can't quit my job as a cook because now you can. And now people are saying, I think I want to do something different. And I think I want to either join a team, I want to be part of that train, or I want to be the locomotive. I want to be my own train. Or I'm saying get on the ecosystem building bandwagon and get things out of the way. And let's help entrepreneurs be more successful.
Awesome. Well, Eric, it's been great having you on. I appreciate you sharing everyone your background, your insight. It's great to hear your vision for the upstate here in the next 10 years. And we're really, really glad you decided to join Next and come on board. I want to remind the audience that the recording will be sent out later on this afternoon. Please complete the survey after the webinar ends. And we will be having more webinars like this in the future, where we'll be bringing on some other ecosystem developers and builders throughout the state We really wanted to use this as a way to share best practices, to make connections, and to strengthen our entrepreneurial ecosystems here. And so definitely appreciate Eric coming on today.
And don't forget, come to next LaunchPad next
Yes.
Thursday. It's free, giving away $100,000. You're going to get a sneak peek of the Startup Greenville map. It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, next Launchpad is going to be great. And if anyone doesn't know, next week is, I think maybe officially or unofficially, Greenville Startup Week. GVL Starts Demo Day is also next week. There's some other events. But
Flywheel,
yes.
Flywheel's having a tech slam and egg. So we're making a startup week out of it. On Friday, we're going to have a toast to innovation. So music on Main Street is going to kind of cap the whole thing off, and it'll be a fun time. And again, I'll say it's just the beginning, but the foundation has been laid for a long time to allow us to take it from here and move it on up.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Eric. And we hope everybody has a great Thursday. Thanks, everyone.